Hi, this is Mark O'Brien from Scalyr, talking to you about our new cost management feature. The Scalyr service is billed based on log volume measured in average gigabytes per day. Exceeding your monthly plan will result in overage charges. So while we have plenty of elasticity to handle any peaks in your log volume, we also want to make sure we give you the tools to manage your logs so that you're only capturing the logs that actually have value to you. This is where the cost management function comes in. This is a feature that's now available in Scalyr Labs. The feature gives you the ability to define log categories and set a planned log volume value for each. We give you a heads-up display showing how you're doing relative to that plan. We can notify you if the categories exceed their log volume plan. And also we give you a tool for discarding log lines to help you reduce your log volume. Before we dive into the cost management tool itself, I want to talk about how Scalyr tracks your log volume in the Scalyr meta log. In this demo account, I'm searching for tag equals log volume and metric equals log bytes. And what comes up are these lines from the Scalyr meta log that are tracking log volume broken down by the log source. The number of bytes is captured in the value field. And you can see some of these lines have server host and log file values, while the Kubernetes lines have a lot more metadata, including the Kubernetes cluster and the Kubernetes controller. I mention this because we can use these 4 fields to define log categories: server host, log file, K8s-controller, and K8s-cluster. All right, so now we're ready to look at the cost management feature itself. Because it's a Scalyr lab, first we're going to go and enable it. So from the user menu, go to Scalyr Labs, scroll down to the cost management section and make sure that it's turned on. And now when I go to the billing plan page, you'll notice there's a cost management section here underneath the bar chart showing your log volume per day. From a high level, you can see that I've got a set of log categories here. Beneath that, there are discard filters per category and then notification settings down at the bottom. You can see that I already have a set of log categories defined, and I'm showing my planned volume per day for each of these categories that I specified. We're calculating the average per day, month to date, and also showing you the total log volume in the last 24 hours. For each category, I've got these 3 icons, which from right to left allow me to delete the category, edit the category definition, or do a search for log lines that match this category definition. I'm going to edit this first category, and you can see here that I specified a name, a planned usage, and a search filter. We're using the standard Scalyr search syntax here, and in this example, I'm using the matches keyword to do a regular expression search against the Kubernetes cluster field. So I'm looking for any Kubernetes cluster that begins with the text K8s-test. Looking at this app server category here, I'm instead using the server host field, and I'm just looking for server hosts that contain the text app server. The fields that are available for defining a log category are server host, log file, K8s-cluster, and K8s-controller. You can use any combination of these 4 fields, and we use the Scalyr syntax here, including Boolean operators. So you can do things like, if the server host matches one thing or the Kubernetes cluster matches another thing. One thing to note here is that we only count each log source once, and these rules are evaluated in order. So for this example, the first 2 rules are basically looking at the same thing. So I'm looking at a Kubernetes cluster beginning with K8s-test, and this is also going to match the same thing. So that's why here we're showing 0 bytes, because these bytes have already been counted by the first category. So a cool thing about this approach is that you can order your rules from specific to general. So when I look at my log overview page here, you can see I've got these app servers. I've got a bunch of app servers here that have 3 different types of logs on them: Nginx access logs, Linux metrics, and app server logs. So I could define an Nginx category that matches on server host contains app server and log file contains Nginx. So that's going to capture specifically the Nginx access logs. And then I also have a more general rule here that captures everything where server host contains app server. But since I've defined that other field above it, basically this ends up serving as a catch-all rule. So this catches those other 2 log types that are not Nginx. And lastly, you'll notice there's an other category at the bottom here. This counts all of the log lines that haven't matched any of the other categories. Scrolling down is where we set up the notifications. We've designed this to be dead simple. You turn it on or off, and you specify 1 or more email addresses that you'd like to be notified when 1 or more category exceeds their log volume. If you're looking for something more granular, you can, of course, use those meta logs that I showed you earlier, and you can use the Scalyr Alerts function to define more specific and more granular alerts. They could go to different recipients for different categories. They can also take advantage of our different notification methods and integrations like Slack and PagerDuty, etc. So that's outside of the scope of this video, but we do have a Help Center article on how to set alerts based on log volume, and I'll link to that in the description of this video. Lastly, the third piece of cost management is the discard filters. Before we get into that, let's just talk about the fact that there are many places in the ingestion pipeline where log lines can be discarded. So they can be discarded in the agent, which saves the data from even leaving your data center. It can also be done in the parser, and now it can be done as part of cost management. And for an in-depth comparison of the pros and cons for each of these types, please check out our sampling and discard video, which is also linked in the description. But in short, the main benefit of using this UI for discarding lines is the fact that it's all centralized in one place. So you're not digging into different parsers, and you don't have to go back to the configuration of the Scalyr agent, which lives on your servers, to make changes here. There's also an added benefit that you can turn these filters on and off within this UI in case you'd like the benefit of additional logging. So here we're looking at the storefront category has a discard filter based on the string level equals debug. So we're filtering out any debug lines. And this is a pretty common use case, basically eliminating the chattiest, most detailed log lines, which you probably don't need on a regular basis. But let's say I'm troubleshooting something and I want that additional detail. I can turn off this filter by clicking, and you'll notice here it gives me the option to specify a time period in hours. And so that saves me from having to remember to re-enable it. So I'm going to do a search here. And after I pause for a few moments, you can see that while these log lines weren't appearing before, they just started appearing a few minutes after I changed the filter setting. Since the cost management code runs after parsing, with discard filters, we also have access to parse fields. So I want to take a look at these Nginx access logs here. I'm going to do a search for them. And what you'll see is that I have a status field with values including 200 and 502. So let's say I want to get rid of my 200s. I can go to the filter here, and I can write a filter where status equals 200. You'll notice it's not enabled by default, so I have to enable it. And then once I enable it, a few moments later, it's going to start filtering out all of my log lines where the status is 200. So there you have a walkthrough of our new cost management functionality. This is still a lab, so it's evolving. We welcome any questions or feedback you have. Feel free to reach out to us through our support center at support.scalyr.com or drop us an email to support@scalyr.com. Thanks so much for watching.